Shut this off here. So good afternoon all, and welcome. I'm Joe DeMartino, Advizex Managed Service Practice Director. I'd like to welcome you and thank you for taking time out of your schedule today to join us for this webinar and of course the bourbon tasting. We have a quick, but we are hoping it is a very impactful overview of and demo of our monitoring as a service. Our agenda and game plan for today, I'll leave this up, but we're going to get this going with a local three. Chris Hall's on the line. He's going to start us off with a cocktail from the samples he sent out. From there, I will provide a quick overview of our monitoring as a service. It'll only be a few slides, I promised. Just a quick, quick overview of it. And after that, I will pass it off to Chris Stoker. Chris is a lead architect for our monitoring as a service offering. He's going to spend some time, about 10 minutes, showing you the portal that comes with monitoring as a service and discuss deployment options, in and outs of the portal and some dashboards. And then Ken Gleason, who is a senior solution architect, will drill down a bit into our MaaS and how it works with SQL Server. At this point, we'll do Q&A through the chat. We'll try to answer as much as we can throughout there. With the amount of attendees that's going on, I doubt we're gonna be able to answer every one of them. We'll do our best, but either way, we will get that out to you as far as the answers. And then from there, we will send it back to Chris, and Chris will take you through the rest of the tastings. And during the tastings, we certainly can take questions as well, both Chris and then Q&A on the monitoring as a service. So I think we have this block for an hour. From our side, we're planning about 25, 30 minutes of demos, and then Chris is going to spend some time just going through his bourbon stuff, which I think we're probably all here for. So Chris, I'm going to send it to you quickly to kick us off with a drink, and then I'll take over after you're done.
For sure. I get the good part. I get to get everybody a little sauce. So thanks so much. You got a little Manhattan right here. You can see the cherry floating in it. My one piece of advice to you is if you go somewhere and you get that like glowing orange maraschino cherry, you need to not order a Manhattan, just get whatever whiskey it is in a glass or on the rocks. So a little bit about the history of the drink. It surprisingly, I'm sure you will find, started in Manhattan. Supposedly it was Winston Churchill's mother who was throwing a political dinner for Samuel Tilden back in the 1800s, who said, hey, I need a special drink. They made this drink, which was American whiskey, Italian vermouth, and Angostura bitters, and you have what still today is the Manhattan. Basically, people started walking around New York City saying, I want that drink I had at the Manhattan, which was the name of the club where they had the event, and that's how you got the name. So the whiskey in here is Old Forester 1897. So really quick, a little bit about that. It's 100 proof. So all the whiskey you're going to be drinking today is high proof. So have some water with you, or just pass out on the floor of wherever you are if you drink it all. I'm good either way. Have no agenda, but do know that none of this is a little 80 proof. This is all high octane go-go juice. So it will have a tendency to punch a little hard. So Old Forester is a terrific brand. It's actually America's first bottled bourbon and the only continuously bottled bourbon from 1870 until now. So George Garvin Brown was in Louisville and was hanging out there, and he was a pharmaceutical salesman, and there was a doctor by the last name of Forrester, and he thought that if he bottled whiskey, it would be better for people because that way you just weren't getting random stuff with no quality control. And so he did. He bottled the first whiskey. 1897 was the Bottled in Bond Act, which is the first American Consumer Protection Act that we have on record. It was put through by Colonel Edmund Haynes Taylor. Many of you have consumed a whiskey named after him, E.H. Taylor. And so it was really the first time we had a chance to make sure that what was in the bottle was regulated and we knew what it was. So what does bottled in bond mean? It means it's been made during a single season at one distillery. It's been aged in a federally bonded warehouse for at least 4 years, and it's gone in at 100 proof. Back then, people would just randomly throw things in bottles, say it was good, sell it to you at market price, and it would be 50 proof and made by their sister out in somewhere, and it was terrible. So this was really America's first Consumer Protection Act. And Old Forester, when they started their Whiskey Row series, Jackie and Campbell were very intent on tracing the history of Old Forester and their bourbon from the late 1800s all the way up into the mid-20s when Prohibition hit. Old Forester was one of the 6 distilleries that got a license to distill medicinal alcohol during Prohibition, so they were one of the ones that made it. So a really great Manhattan. I hope you guys enjoy it. One of my favorite cocktails. Everyone should be able to make a Manhattan in an old fashioned. We can talk about that later. But I will go ahead and turn this over and see you guys in a few. And please drink the Manhattan. If you want to start sipping on other stuff, we will. I'll just give you a little bit. The order that we're going to drink in, not that it really matters, but it does a little bit, is we're going to go Knob Creek, Belle Meade, Bullet, and Pinhook. I'll put that in the chat so you can organize your lives around that, and we'll go from there. So thanks for having me, everybody. While y'all are learning, I will go in the chat and put that in there and have fun. Thanks.
Okay, great. And Chris, I think there's a couple questions in there too for you already. Obviously, the ones about our offering you can answer. You can't answer, but you know, stuff around the bourbon, I'll let you deal with.
Perfect. Sounds like a plan. I'm on it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. All right, guys, thanks. Like I said, this is Joe DeMartino. I'm going to spend a couple minutes on a couple slides just to give an overview. We've had one of these earlier in December, kind of that same thing. Just going to hit upon what our offering is, and then hand it over to Chris Stoker to do a little bit of the demo. I see Chris is doing a little sampling now. But,
yeah, you better hurry.
Yeah, so thank you, Chris, for doing that. But in all seriousness, I'm excited to walk you through this. So MaaS is focused on providing you with the access to the latest and greatest predictive monitoring tool set for your IT stack. With all the headaches of having to maintain it, we wanted to develop a solution that was going to help deal with some of the common pains that we were hearing our clients talk about. Our offerings really, really to focus on detecting hardware failures, network failures, usage spikes, resource limitations, software malfunctions, applications and database availability, among other things, and system performance degradation. To the right in this slide here are some of the benefits and key points of our offering. Rather than going through each of those, I'm going to go through them in other slides, but I wanted to put them up there just to give you a high-level overview of quickly what's meant to tackle and a summary of our offering. And now I'm going to break into a little bit about why we came up with it and how it's offered. So this is a cloud and SaaS-based offering where we deploy a collector at each site. There are no agents installed other than the collector on a VM that points to our service. It is a price per device management IP address and subscription-based model. So you're having a monthly fee associated with it, thus helping with a lot of clients come to us about having a predictable operational cost, and that's what this is doing, and alleviating kind of that capital expenditure for a new tool set. So it's pricing per device, per IP address, management IP address. For network, we have also the availability what's called the light version network device, where right out of the gate, there's so many data sources that come with with we're monitoring. So we have a light version where it'll come with 5 or 6 data sources. So that's obviously a different lower cost. So it's good. We see value and we see traction in that with switches and the closets that really you really want just a couple of data sources. You don't have to monitor everything. Our tool set, oops, sorry about that. MaaS, our tool set behind the scenes is Logic Monitor platform. And it is enhanced with Advizex IP, thus ensuring key metrics are monitored in place based on our decade of experience between Logic Monitor and Advizex. So we took the Logic Monitor platform, and on top of it, we also added all of our stuff that we developed over 20 years too. So it's the best of both worlds. We got Logic Monitor behind us, really helping us maintain it and taking all that management off your plate. Our service allows for the flexibility as far as where, when, how the alerts are sent, meaning we have an offering where we can just set up the alerts to go directly to your people, to your help desk, to your service desk, and be notified. Or we can take those alerts and we can take them and start remediation or triage. We have a lot of different options for you. So that's what this is supposed to show, is flexibility for our offering to deal with some of your pain points. Our default for this is for Advizex to manage the tool, meaning we'll take care of the moves, adds, and changes, and we'll do it 24/7. So it's one less thing that your team has to worry about. If you want to add new devices or data sources, we'll take care of that for you. Just open a quick ticket up and it'll be done. So why MaaS? Quickly, many of you know we have a 24/7 managed service offering where we provide full monitoring management already for infrastructure, databases, applications, and cloud platforms. But we noticed a trend with clients and prospects. Requests are coming in for assistance with monitoring to help address a few common challenges. So I just wanted to point some of those challenges out, and this is kind of why, and this is our target for where we see MaaS fitting in. One of the most common ones was overwhelming amount of feedback around the overall cost of existing and new monitoring tool sets. From the infrastructure to the licenses to the support of the cost, the capital expenditures, they were all adding up, and clients were asking us different options, particularly for OpEx costs rather than capital expenditure. We also saw a trend where clients come to us and ask us for assistance in gaps in coverage. So not only the monitoring aspect of this, but MaaS, we can provide gaps in coverage for, let's say, weekends, holidays, off hours, where we can set up MaaS where your team gets it, the alert during the day, and then maybe we get it at night, weekends, or holidays. So we're flexible in that. But that's to really help fill some of those gaps where you don't want your people working 24/7. Let our people do it, and we can do that for you. Another gap that we saw our solution was limited capabilities that other tool sets had in place, from other tool sets not having the ability to be SaaS-based to the newer technologies of having AI built in to really help detect anomalies before they occur. And then one of the other ones we saw, and listen, there's a lot out there, but we really try to base this off of what we were hearing from our existing client base, was tool sets that were lacking meaningful historical trends, meaningful dashboards. Our offering, Logic Monitors, allows you to have 2 years of data kept. So you can do really good trend analysis based off of that. You can pick point in times and run them against point in times from a year ago. So there's really good information out there in dashboards. Chris and Ken are going to show you some of that and show you how much you can drill down on and capture on it. So based on those conversations with the clients, we developed our MaaS and MaaS Plus to tackle those challenges. I'm sure there's other business justifications and other concerns, but out of the gate, these are really where we see it benefiting a lot of people and a lot of clients. So let me take a minute to explain the deployment model, and then I'll go over the MaaS and MaaS Plus, and then I'll hand it over to Chris so you can get into the tool a little bit. So this is a very high level picture, but quickly, let's say Chris will walk through some of the components about the collector, and he can answer some of those questions as he's going through the demo. But high level, the collector is deployed to each site, and it sends the data to our service, and our service is configured based on your requirements for who to alert and when, and based how it's configured. It's agentless besides what's sitting on the collector, so you don't have to worry about installing agents or the agents bogging down any other resources. Once in the portal, and by the way, the portal that Chris is going to show you and Ken, you'll have full access to. So whatever you're going to see, you'll have the ability to use as well. But once in there, aside from what Chris is going to show you, one key component is you can access a device directly through this portal. You can do RDP, SSH, Telnet, VNC, HTTP. Chris can show you how to do that. The portal is web-based, and there is an app for it as well. And then it is role-based access. As far as alerts, you have the capability, like I said, we have the capability to send them to you directly, or we can take them and escalate to you based on your requirements. But the notifications can come via text messages, emails, voicemails, and alert integrations. So here's a breakdown of our offerings. High level, you can see the differences. Really the main difference is how alerting is happening. So with MaaS, the focus and idea around MaaS was alerts are sent to your in-house team and Advizex manages the tool. So that's the only interaction is us taking care of moves, adds, and changes. Other than that, we're setting up our tool set to go directly to your distribution list, however you want them. We're not doing anything else with that. But we will do moves, adds, and changes for you. And you can just send an email to our help desk to do that. It is a monthly subscription fee that includes a license per device, as we talked about. The time baked in there for a little tool management. And there is a one-time setup fee, right? As part of the solution, we're going to deploy this for you right out of the gate to make sure it's set up, configured properly. And then as changes are needed, again, our service is there to make those changes for you. The major difference, well, I'll go through MaaS Plus. A lot of the stuff I said for MaaS, alerts can be sent. The major difference, alerts can be sent to you or a combination or to Advizex. So we'll set up our system based on the escalation paths that you want us to do. If it's off hours or if it's, only weekends and holidays, we can set up alerts to go to you guys directly during the day and then to us during off hours. You tell us how to do it, we'll set that up. And that goes into our CMDB where we're gonna know exactly, it's gonna know automatically where to go based on that. The other aspect of MaaS, we call it MaaS Plus, is at this point, this is where we're also gonna offer to do some type of either incident management, triage, remediation, whatever you're looking for us to do. Maybe for type 1, or I should say, critical components, you want us to take immediate triage for it. We can bake that in and do that. So with MaaS Plus, we're not only gonna do the monitoring, but we're gonna have some kind of agreement where you want some kind of support in the back end. And that's gonna come with what we call like subscription units. We'll discuss how many hours a month that you want us to do that, where our team can then, go in and based on the type of alert, go in and to fix it or remediate or triage it. There is a one-time setup fee with that as well, just like the other one. And the big thing too is if we go MaaS Plus and you're having us to do remediation or any type of support, it is SLA back for response. Meaning if there was a P1 that came in, it's 15 minutes we would start responding to and fixing it right away. Our SLAs for that type of work are, critical is 15 minutes for response, high is 30, mediums 4 hours, and a low is 12 hours. But again, that's only for if we're remediating it. Alerts are gonna come directly to you guys instantaneously, no matter what. It's just if we're doing triage or remediation, we'll have that much time to respond and start doing the triage. And any one of these come with client portal, and they're all based on per IP address as well. And so, by the way, somebody asked me, we'll be able to send this out. This will be available. This is a good little breakdown to understand the differences. But again, this is just a high level aspect of it. We're very flexible on how we can create our offerings for you. But we had to put something down that makes sense. But when it's all said and done, we want to find something that's going to fit your solution and your requirements. With that, like I said, my side was quick hitting. I had the easy part, I think. I'm going to send this over to Chris Stoker. Chris will take you through a demo of the portal. Again, remember the portal that Chris will be showing comes the MaaS service. So you have the capabilities that Chris will be showing. And then from there, Ken will take you through a quick drill down of the MaaS and how it works with the SQL Server. So thank you. And I'll try to get to some of the questions in the chat area as Chris is talking. And like I said, we may not be able to get to all the Q&A, but we'll do our best. So Chris, I'm going to stop sharing and send it over to you.
All right, thank you, Joe. I will share my desktop here and show the portal. So as Joe alluded to earlier, this is a SaaS-based product that we're using here. So you have a cloud portal that's available from any location. As far as any on-prem software that's required, mainly you just need to have a collector deployed in your environment. The collectors can run on either Linux or Windows. The only caveat being that if you're going to be monitoring any Windows services, Windows operating systems, the collector would need to be installed on a Windows server just to facilitate the WMI polling. that it uses. For pretty much every other instance, the collector can be installed on just a Linux VM. We generally recommend that a minimum of 2 collectors be installed for high availability purposes. And as far as a communications path goes, the collector would obviously need to have access to the devices that it's going to monitor. So that could be SNMP, SSH, HTTPS, just depending on the device requirements for that. And then the collector would also need outbound TLS access to the Logic Monitor cloud to be able to upload the data into their data warehouse for the analysis portion. So there's no inbound access required, and the collector only needs, just like I said, SSL access outbound to the Logic Monitor cloud. So when you log into the dashboard, this is a role-based access environment. So from a client's perspective, when you log in, you'll only see your information, your devices, your systems. So when you first log in, on the left-hand menu, you've got this list of areas that you can work from. The first tab here is the dashboard area. This houses all of your dashboards. These can be custom dashboards that we've already created. We can create dashboards specifically for your use depending on what data you would like to see. So these are highly customizable. You can have public dashboards that's available for everyone. You can also create your own private dashboards for individuals logging into the system. So if you have different teams, such as network and database, they could have their own private dashboards and create those there. And then you can also pin these as a favorite. So just have a single favorites list of your dashboards. I'll come back to this area a little bit later. It'll make more sense once we get through the rest of the demo. On the resources tab, this is where all of your devices are added and visible from a device level. It's based on a tree hierarchy structure, so we can build out multiple locations depending on what your environment is. If you have locations across the globe or multiple locations, we can split those out. And then within each location, we can also split it out however you would like to group things together. So our default is just based on applications, backups, network, levels like that. And then once you drill down in, you can have production and non-production. And then you can split it out even further if you'd like, where you have firewalls, routers, switches. I apologize, my part will focus on network because that's my background, but just to kind of give you an idea of what's capable in the product and tool set here. So if we drill down into, this is a FortiGate firewall as an example here. Just out of the box default, this is all of the data points that were picked up from the firewall. So these are all of the data sources that we can monitor on a FortiGate without any customization needs or any special scripting. And then once you drill down into a particular data point, so if we look at the interfaces, for example, then each one of these are the instances of that data point that are being monitored. And as you drill down further and further into the structure, once you get to an actual data source instance, then you can see the individual data for that particular instance. So in this example, we can see the data throughput, the packet throughput, any drops or errors that have occurred for this particular VLAN. You can change your time frame up here in the top right-hand corner. So you can use predefined time ranges. You can drill out to the last 7 days, for example. You can do custom time ranges. And as soon as you change this time range, all of your data and graphs are going to reflect that time period. As you're looking through these, if you see something that's looks out of place, you can drill in to that specific graph and get more granular time frames and detail for that particular peak that you're looking at. And then you can just reset the timeline back to the original. Across the top here, you're going to have different graphs that you can look at as well, depending on where you're at. So if you're at the top of the tree, for example, on the device itself, You can see a full listing of all of the data points, and you can just drop down to see the different graphs for that data point. On the information tab is, this is just basic information that's picked up from the device as part of the discovery process. So here you can see that it found the FortiGate model number, shows you the uptime of the device, software versions that are running, device level detail like that is here in this info tab. The alerts tab, you can see any alerts that are currently active for the device. By default, it shows just the ones that have not cleared. If you want to go back and look at history, you can view all alerts and see all the alerts that have occurred on that particular device. And these most of these tabs are also available at the instance level as well. Service downtime, this is where you can schedule, maintenance windows, any scheduled downtime that you're going to have. This can be done at the device level. It can be done at the interface level, for example, and the network side. So you can schedule these service downtimes as granular as you would like, or you can just put the entire device in service downtime. Traffic, so the tool also includes net flow analysis. So from a network perspective, we can get net flow data from the individual devices, and that information, the collector gathers that information and then sends that up to the cloud for the analysis portion. But we can get full, let me get a little more granular here just to show better. But we can get detailed net flow data from here as well. So you can get the top talkers, top source and destinations, etc. You can also do, so mapping is available as well. These maps from a network perspective rely on LLDP or CDP, but you can view a topology map from the perspective of the device that you're looking at and see what's connected directly to it and how these paths lay out. And this also comes into play when you start looking at suppressing alerts for devices behind the device that's down. So for example, if the core switch were to go down, all of these devices' alerts would be suppressed as far as an alerting perspective. You would still see the alerts available, but we wouldn't necessarily generate a notification for those, just that the core switch is down. So that's a walkthrough of the resources tab. Other things that we can do in the tool as well. Website monitoring. So if you have either an external or an internal website, web application that you need to monitor, we can monitor those as well. If it's an external site, there's collectors deployed across the globe. So you can monitor that external site from various locations, and you'll get details such as, the status of the site, the response time, connection performance, etc. From an internal perspective, if you have a website that you need to monitor, we can do multi-stage monitoring as well. So you could have the collector log into the website, perform a specific check. There's several stages that you can walk through to do a website check for that internal sites there. Mapping tab, this gives you the ability to create custom maps. So as I showed you in the resource tree, you can see a map from the perspective of the device that you were looking at. But from this mapping tab, you can create your own topology map, adding devices that you want to see, removing devices that you may not necessarily care about. Then down in the alerts tab, we have all of the alerts for the entire environment. So this is a filterable list of everything that's in the environment. You can filter out based on severity levels. You can look for certain keywords, and you can just filter all of the alerts that way, as opposed to going into the individual devices themselves and looking at them from that perspective. Next on here is the reports tab. For these reports, you can create custom reports that can be ran on demand or emailed out based on a schedule. These are more inventory type reports, bandwidth type reports, things like that that you can have automatically sent to you or run on demand. But all of this information is also available in dashboard views, which probably provide more detailed information of what you're looking for any given time range. And I know Ken's going to cover this in more detail in his SQL demo, but just to kind of show you a couple of dashboards and what you can get out of those. The first dashboard I'll show is the alert overview. This is just a basic NOC style dashboard. So this will give you a red, yellow, green status for the devices that the dashboard's covering. If you have multiple. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of echo there now. That's better, sorry. If you have locations defined for these devices, we can show those on a map and show the status of each location. And then from that, you can drill down into that specific area. And then it just shows all of the current active alerts for the location. So that's one style dashboard that we can provide. Another one, if you want to look at the net flow data, for example, so we can have a dashboard specifically for net flow and just show you the details of the net flow being received. Network performance, so you can have an overview of your network as a whole, show your total traffic, any errors, show the top interfaces by throughput, so you can see all these different graphs of data. And then the last one I'll show is a vSphere perspective. So if you're monitoring an ESX host, for example, you can have all your hosts in one dashboard, or you can break them out however you would like, but this will show you ESX specific information. And this is where you can monitor all your virtual machines from a hardware level. So this is going to give you CPU, memory, disk utilization, VM state, powered on, powered off, that type of information. If you want to get more specific Windows type information, then you can get that from the Windows OS itself, the VMs. And this will give you more detailed information on the Windows services that are running and things like that. And then the last thing I wanted to show real quick is we can do remote access from the tool itself. So the way this works is instead of having to VPN into your environment and then access a jump host and then access the device, we can actually, or you can as well if you're working remote, access the device straight through the portal here itself. And the way this works is once you start the session, the collector will initiate a connection to the device internally. So, for example, my workstation would never physically touch that device. It would be a proxied connection. So the collector will establish a connection internally to the remote device and then just proxy that connection back through the cloud to the portal itself. So to do that remote connection, you just highlight the device you want to connect to, come up here to this little drop-down arrow, and then for remote session. And as Joe pointed out earlier, you can do RDP, SSH, Telnet, VNC, or HTTPS. And basically that'll just open another tab, browser tab with the web UI or the SSH session in that new tab. So I know that was kind of quick and I jumped through a lot of different areas. Just trying to keep this short for time's sake, but if there's any questions, feel free, please put them in the Q&A and we'll respond to them as soon as we can. But with that, I will pass this over to Ken so that he can give you more deep dive into the Microsoft SQL monitoring.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And what we see here is another dashboard for the SQL Server specific. And if we look here, you'll see the total SQL servers. I've got 2 servers set up in a clustered environment with always on going on between them, which is Microsoft's high availability and DR solution for SQL Server. And in addition, I have one more additional instance on one of the servers that is not part of that solution. So I have a total of 2 instances, one of which is shared in the cluster and one is not. As you'll see here, Chris showed several dashboards, and this is the SQL. This is a version of a SQL Server dashboard. As Chris said, these are fully customizable, but you'll see that there's a variety of types of data that can be shown here. We have CPU utilization. You know, we have lots of line graphs. Then we have some tables over here, which is memory utilization, which in the case of SQL Server always takes as much memory as it can. So this isn't as useful for SQL Server as it would be an application server or other type of server. Down here on the storage utilization, you know, it tells you how much is used and everything else, but you'll notice this other one that's a days until alert. That'd say alert if it extended a little bit further. But we can expand that. You'll see it says days until alert. So there's some intelligence in here to let you know, based upon your prior consumption, you have this many days until you are going to reach an alert status. And those alert statuses, I'll show you in just a minute, are configurable, and they're based upon either gigabytes left on the drive or based upon a percentage. But if we look up here in these other graphs, there's some other intelligence that, for instance, this graph is kind of messy. If we can go ahead and remove these graphs, so we're only showing one of the servers, or one of the instances, excuse me. And you'll see that total by buffer cache hit ratio, which you want to be close to 100% in a SQL Server. So you can customize these to show, to take them out, and it's good for analysis. And as Chris showed you, if you want to see a specific peak or whatever, you can drill down within it, and that functionality exists here. And so you can see, drill down further within there, and that's you can see this on any of the line graphs, or you can go in here and this will return back to the way it was. You can also, there's also a switch here to see the data points, which for this it may or may not matter, but you can see both, just the graph or the data point, the underlying data points themselves. So up here in the right-hand corner, we've got our 2 servers here. And once again, Chris alluded to kind of a knock status here. And if we have one that's green, that doesn't show an alert, where this one does show an alert. So if we click on that, it then brings us to the data source itself. And much like Chris showed us these before with all the network type data points. These are more Windows operating system and SQL Server data points that are listed here. And as I said, I've got 2 servers in a cluster, so you'll see some cluster node status and CPU. So if you click on the CPU, you got your graphs in here, and you can see anything that's a number basically is depicted in the graph. So we'll see the CPU usage, and then we can also look at the individual disks. And this information itself, as Chris said, comes from WMI. So It uses a very common protocol to probe these, to probe the servers to get this information. And so there's disk information. Now, if we go down here to database specific pieces here, there's one for always on, as I said, is their high availability DR status. If we click here, we can see various points, how transactions are a synchronization state. And, you know, a synchronization state of 2, that seems kind of unusual. Is that good or bad? If you look over here at your alert tuning pieces, you can go down to the synchronization state, and it'll give you a definition of it. And here it says that the 2 is synchronized. So that's exactly what we want. So, but what all these various data points are, there's a definition, some of which are apparent, but there's definitions there also for what these data points actually are. If we move down a little bit further into the SQL Server databases, you'll see that it picked up the 2 different instances here. And you have a whole bunch of data points here that you could either alert on, or you could either enable an alert, or just enable collection of data without an alert. And you can set the specific thresholds for these. For instance, this is one that we have set here. And we have a threshold for backups that if we get a warning if there hasn't been a backup in 8 days, and we get an error, an alert condition, if it hasn't been in 15 days. And the nice thing about it is that you can change this. This is fully configurable at the instance state, the database state, or even on up into the servers or location, or however your hierarchy goes, you can set these up. The other piece is, as far as the dashboards, we're going to be returning there in a little bit. But you can choose any one of these graphs, and you can go ahead and drop this down, and you can add it to the dashboard. And so in this case, it pulls up here, and the dashboard, SQL Server. We click on Save. We can now go over to this dashboard, and come on.
Yeah, and then, hey, Ken, after wrapping this up, we got to give this some time to local 3 too. So, you know, maybe
Okay.
we can finish on this, and then we can go local 3. I want everybody, because I don't want, we have like an hour. I want to make sure that we can get to the bird.
Okay. So let me just do this again really quickly. I think I missed a save. And I did the same mistake again. Anyway, it will show up there. So I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I think you, but the thing I wanted to emphasize here is that they are fully configurable. You can change them as you see fit. And just one last quick look at the Windows servers. As Chris briefly showed, you know, there are different types. You can just have numbers up here or anything else, and you can change it as you like to see fit. So with that, Joe, I'll go ahead and hand it back to you.
Yep. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, we want to make sure we get through this. So Chris Hall, I'm going to send it over to you. You know, and meanwhile, behind the scenes, we'll work to answer any Q&A you guys that everybody has. But I want to obviously give local 3 and Chris some time to go through the bourbon. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate you sitting through that. And Chris, away you go.
Let's drink whiskey. So If you do have a question, throw it in the chat. That way I can actually see it as I'm doing stuff. Really quick, a little bit on some history. Obviously, or not so obviously, the name bourbon does come from the French Bourbon Dynasty, right? And generally is associated with Kentucky, but bourbon does not have to be produced there. So what is bourbon? There are some things that you should know. It does have to be produced in the United States. It does have to be produced with a mash bill of at least 51% corn. We'll talk about that in a minute. It has to be distilled no higher than 160 proof, right? When it goes into the barrel, it must be at least 80 proof. When it comes out, it can't be more than 125, basically. It has to be aged for a minimum of 2 years in charred new American oak. That's very different, right? Scotch generally uses other, they might use port barrels or old wine barrels. Bourbon has to have new American oak, right? It's got to be all natural. There are no additives, no preservatives, no coloring, anything like that. So that's pretty much what bourbon is. So the most important thing is what you're going in. So is what's going in. So bourbon has to be at least 51% corn. Okay. So generally it will be in the high 70s, low 80s, right? That's where you're going to get your sweetness. As bourbon ages, you'll kind of lose a little bit of that, and it'll get more earthy. But that corn is going to be where you get your predominant bourbon flavor. Rye, you'll hear about high rye bourbons. We're going to drink high rye bourbon today, right? So rye is going to give it its spice. Okay, it might give it minty, herbaceous, eucalyptus, all those things. That's going to come from rye. So think about rye bread, and then you've got two kind of wild cards. You've got wheat and barley. So barley is generally going to be used to aid fermentation, but that's not just it. It does add flavor. Malted barley makes what? It makes scotch. So the idea that when you put barley in whiskey, there's no flavor is asinine. So if anyone tells you that, you can just brush them off. Then you get wheat oftentimes in place of bourbon. So you hear about wheated bourbon. The most famous of bourbons out there, Pappy Van Winkle, is a wheated bourbon. So when you hear about wheaters, that will generally be a smoother, more corn-dominant taste, but that wheat will make it mellow out and do that. So why do you age bourbon? I mean, when it goes in, just so everybody understands, it's what they call white dog. It comes off a column still. You cut the first part of the run, which is called the head. You cut the back part of the run, which is called the tails, because it's harsh alcohol out. And you take the middle. Well, that central part of it is where you're going to get bourbon. But when it goes into the barrel, it is clear white. It's what they call white dog, what you might call moonshine. Okay, so any color that the bourbon gets is going to get from aging in a barrel. So you're going to take these new American oak barrels, right? And you're going to toast them. You're going to char them on the inside. The most common char is char number 4, called alligator char. And flames are shot through that barrel for about 55 seconds. The time that it ages in that barrel is what's going to give it the color. It's also going to give it a lot of the vanilla aspect to it, and many of those things. So you'll hear about, I mean, you'll hear a lot about toasted barrels and is it, you know, how toasty it is. The toast is less important than how long it's going to spend in there, right? Because the more it's going to spend in there, the more it's there. So that's a little bit history. Just to give you an idea of aging bourbon, with the demand currently, you've seen a lot of bourbons go away from age statements, which is why it's cool to have something that actually spends some time. So in 2013, George T. Stagg, they had 157 barrels for their release. That's 8,300 gallons, roughly. When they actually released it after 15 years and 11 months, they were down to 2,200 gallons of whiskey. So you're looking at a very significant loss, which is called Angel's share in that. So there'll be that. I saw something in the text. If you want to get super technical about bourbon, I'm more for it. I hang out with all these guys. Dave Pickerel is one of my best friends. I mean, any real bourbon is going to age for 2 years. I highly recommend not drinking anything under 4 years. It's going to be green and woody and really not something that you probably want to engage in. I'm used to it because I do a lot of barrel sampling, but you're going to want something 4 years older or older to get into it. So let's dive right into Knob Creek, right? So Knob Creek was first released in 1992, but the name goes back into the 1890s, right? And Jim Beam purchased National Distillers and resurrected it. So Freddie No does distill this, or used to, and now Booker does. And so this is part of their small batch lineup, which is Booker's, Baker's, and Basil Hayden's, along with Knob Creek. So it is billed as a small batch bourbon. What's a small batch bourbon? There's no real rules on what a small batch bourbon should be. It could be anything from 7 barrels, which, you know, we're going to talk about later, to as much as around 200 barrels. It just depends on, and up to 1,200. It just depends on who the distiller is and what they're doing with this. So this is Knob Creek's 12-year-old expression. They lost the age statement, and then they brought it back, which was nice. So they have a 9, a 12, and now a 15. This is 100 proof. The mash bill is 77% corn, 13 rye, and 10% barley. And so there is no right or wrong way to drink bourbon. You guys drink bourbon the way you like it. Anyone that tells you that there's a right or wrong, what's good to your palate and good to somebody else's palate is crazy. So how you want to drink it is a little bit up to you. You know, you can drink it straight, obviously. You can put ice in it. You can put a little bit of cold water in it. Whatever works for your palate. If you do put cold in it, just know that cold, I mean, it will numb your palate a little bit, and it will be harder to taste some of the nuances in it, but there's nothing wrong with that, right? So, you know, you can have Glencairns like this, you can have other glasses, but the first thing to do is give it a look. Check out the color. Generally, the darker it is, the more time it will have spent in wood, or it will have spent in a higher char wood barrel, right? Then give it a nose. As far as, you know, what do you guys get on the nose from this? Like, what's there? You know, for me, toasted oat, you get some caramel, almost a little like cake, like vanilla, like bundt cake. That's all there, right? So you might smell something different, but that's our noses are different, right? So give it a try and see what you get on the palate. So you certainly get the extended time in oak. That's pretty evident right there. There's a little leather notes to me. It's pretty rich. There's a little sweetness, almost like a marshmallow thing going on, right? I don't get a ton of ethanol. The 100 proof's not kicking me around, right? But I do get a little bit of almost white pepper on the end. And then the finish, like, it hits me kind of mid-palate. So on your tongue, you'll have front, mid, and back. This hit me kind of in the mid. It may hit you differently, but I got a little kind of cigar box. You get the leather and the oak, and then almost a little bit of dried, like, fruitcake thing going on. So it's a really, really good. You can generally find this out there. It's going to be more on the premium side. It's not going to come in your plastic bottle, but this is a great sipping bourbon. You can make cocktails with it. Nothing wrong with that. But it's just a really good example of a nice, well-aged bourbon that you can actually find that's not going to break the bank. So that's a little bit on the Knob Creek. All right. So let's talk about Belle Meade. Belle Meade is a very cool story. Charlie and Andy are close friends of mine. Their great-great-great-grandfather was the founder of Belle Meade. Rumor has it, according to Charlie and Andy, this was the original recipe for Jack Daniels that was then changed, right? And so they decided in around 2011 to just bring the brand back. It had basically been scrapped due to prohibition, and they said, hey, let's bring this back and let's do something really cool. So people don't really realize until the mid, like let's say mid 19 teens, there was more whiskey produced in Tennessee than in Kentucky, right? And then it sort of switched to Kentucky, but there's traditionally been a lot with brands like Dickel, Uncle Nearest. There's a lot of great Tennessee whiskey out there. So the Nelson brothers took the original recipe, right, of their great grandfather, and Charlie and Andy decided, hey, we're going to make whiskey with this. So originally they started buying whiskey from MGP. For those of you that don't know, it is not an uncommon practice. There's a large distillery in Lawrenceville, Indiana, called MGP, Midwest Grain Producers. It used to be known as LDI, Lawrenceburg Distillers International, that makes a lot of whiskey that people buy. So does KBD, Kentucky Bourbon Distillers, right? So brands that you may have heard of like Jefferson's, Willet, and Rowan's Creek, tons more. These are all made and then contract distilled and then sent somewhere to age and then bottled by those people that have bought the barrels. So that's how you get a lot of really interesting whiskey. So this comes out at between 110 and 120 proof generally. Its age is going to be from 7 to 11 years. This is still MGP juice. This next year will be the first year that Charlie and Andy will actually have whiskey from their distillery in Nashville now. And so look for that in the next year. So again, color is nice and deep. It's a beautiful amber, lovely color on it. I immediately get tons of cinnamon and kind of baking spice, which makes sense. This is a 30% rye. So 64% corn, 30% rye, 6% barley. Okay. So, I mean, it immediately comes cinnamon, apple pie to me. It's a little punchy with the alcohol. You definitely get it, but it's not overpowering to me. I get raisins on the finish. Excuse me. But the apple pie, the oak, it's a really, really nice sipping bourbon. I think it's a really good pour for the price. You won't find much better out there because you can get this in the $60 range. Excuse me, which for what you're getting is a really good deal. Someone asked if I tried Clyde May. I have. They make some flavored bourbon, which I'm not too keen on, but I think the normal stuff is really good. And I actually think their unaged White Dog, their corn whiskey, is very good. It's one of the two best corns with mellow corn from Heaven Hill. So I do like Clyde May. They've done a nice job. So Belle Meade's a little smaller than someone obviously like Knob Creek or Beam or even Bullet. So if you're looking for a smaller, more boutique brand, that's your brand. And if you're in Nashville, go visit Charlie and Andy and tell them I sent you. So let's go to Bullet. I don't want to move too fast, but I want you guys to, I want to honor the time frame a little bit. So Tom Bullet was a preacher back in the day, and or I'm sorry, Augustus Bullet was Tom's his son, so his great grandson. And around 1830 they started making Bullet, and around 1860 Augustus died, and they really couldn't trace the whiskey. But they did have an original mash bill, which was 2/3 rye, 1/3 corn, which obviously wasn't going to make it if we were going to do bourbon. So Tom said, all right, we'll take some of the original stuff, but we'll change it around. And in 1987, he started Bullet with a high rye mash bill. So this is 28% rye, so not even as high as the other. 68 corn, 4% malted barley. This has been aged 5 to 8 years. So Bullet is a Diageo property now. And this is going to be bottled. This is coming out pretty wicked out of there. So you're going to get around 118, 119 proof. So again, strong whiskey, but that's what we wanted. We wanted the high octane. One of the cool things about high octane whiskey, remember, you can cut it to where you want it. So if you add cold water to this or just water to it, you can drop the proof to wherever it is, which is basically how a lot of whiskey is made, right? It's coming out at 100 proof. They want to distill it at 80. They add water to place back volume, which obviously makes them more money, and off you go to the races. So nice color on it. He definitely comes out with the pepper notes on it. There's some spice. I definitely got a butterscotch thing on this when I tried it the first time. It has that sort of toffee flavor to it. When you try it, and you guys can try it and figure out what you taste, because what you taste isn't what I taste, right? If you want to learn how to blind taste and really taste, just go get some things that are a common flavor in whiskey. So you might get some almonds, you might get some butterscotch, you might get some raisins, you can get some honey. And as you taste certain bourbons, just eat those with it and see what you taste if it goes along with it. So, you know, what always strikes me is, to me, regular bullet is very sweet. This, because of the time in barrel and the proof, is not as sweet. I get more pepper and oak. There are some light fruit notes. I get like almost a golden raisin thing going on, which I really like. But overall, you're getting more heat. There's a good viscosity on this. Remember, that's part of the whole tasting. Like, how does it coat your mouth? Where does it go? The finish on this, to me, is pretty primary, which I like, right? So it's right up front. It coats your whole mouth. It's there, and it has a nice dissipation, just very smooth going away, right? So this is just a whiskey that is a little harder to get than Bullet 10 or regular Bullet, but I think it's worth the chase and worth the time, because it's just there's so much more going on. It's a lot more robust. You're getting a lot more of the wood and the oak, and it's just really tastes like. So that's a good question. What does oak taste like? So it's generally going to manifest itself in two ways. It's going to manifest itself as vanilla. Okay, so you'll get oak and vanilla, but it's really going to taste like think about smelling an oak tree. It'll have a little bit of a musty wood shop style. I mean, you ever walk into a wood shop there's old sawdust in there? Like, imagine that on your palate, and that's the way I would describe oak to you. But overall, it's that vanilla, smooth, creamy characteristic that comes through. So hopefully that made some sense. So Pinhook, very cool friend of mine, Sean Joseph, was in the restaurant business for a long while, was a wine guy, switched over to bourbon, and said, I want to do something very different. So he and his investors founded Pinhook. So Pinhook is a horse racing term. Just so you know what that means. You buy yearlings at auction, and then you break and train them, and then you resell them as race-ready horses, okay? So Pinhook is in Kentucky, but they do not have an actual facility right now. They bought whiskey from MGP, much like Charlie and Andy at Belmead. Now it is being made at Castle and Key. Castle and Key is Will Arvin's project, and it is the old E.H. Taylor distillery. Some of the best water for making whiskey in the world runs right through that property. And so now they are making their whiskey at Castle and Key. So if you look up online a bottle of Pinhook, you will see a horse race on that. Pinhook actually has a partnership with Bourbon Lane Stable, and each of these whiskeys celebrate an individual young thoroughbred, right? The whole idea is that hopefully one of these horses runs in and wins stakes races or derby races, okay? Bourbon War, their 2016 whiskey, almost made the 19 Kentucky Derby, and did run in the Preakness and the Belmont. So they want the bourbon and the horses to coexist and kind of mirror each other. So Pinhook started in 2010. They're definitely different in that Sean is trying to release a very different flavored version every year. So what he's trying to do is take the best barrels that they can and blend those together and make a unique whiskey. which is different than, let's say, Woodford or Maker's Mark. When they blend whiskey, they're going for a pattern, right? They want every bottle of Maker's Mark, no matter where it is in the entire world, to taste the same. That's not what Sean's going for. What Pinhook is trying to do is to make a whiskey that's very distinctive to that year and that season, much like we talked about bottled and bond, and that it stands for that year. So every set of barrels, every set of batches is a new year, okay? So this spent 34 months, so almost 3 years. So this is young, right? They could let this go longer, but they wanted to release it to see how it goes. They're letting some of this age longer, and you'll be able to buy it up to 9 years old as the release point stretches out further. It's about 115 proof, okay? And it was blended from, I think Sean told me, 14 barrels. So mash bill is 75 corn, 15 rye, 10 barley. So this does not have a ton of rye in it, okay? So when you look at this, you can see the lighter color, which kind of makes sense. So this nose is a little more green. Think green wood. When you open it up, there's a little florality to it, almost a honeysuckle thing, a little pear, right? And it kind of masks the high proof on the whiskey, right? But if you give it a really deep smell, you'll get that corn that comes through. So give it a taste and see what you think. For me, green peppercorns, you get the rye, right? The corn is still there, but go back and compare this to the Knob Creek. You can taste the difference in the age. The Pinhook is just a little sharper, right? It's a little spicier, and it's going to be a little more forward. That time in barrel has really mellowed the Knob Creek out. Same with the Belle Meade, and given it a chance to really, really, really mellow out and mellow through. So it's a very different whiskey. I wanted to taste it last. Cherries there for sure. Definitely a florality thing to it. The nose is much lighter. It's a lot. It just hasn't spent as much time sitting in that barrel and soaking everything up. To me, this is a whiskey that's all about potential. I can't wait to see it when they release it in 5 years with more age on it. I think it's just a really interesting thing. And it's why I wanted to taste it last. I think the Knob Creek kind of starts you on this smooth journey, and then we kind of ramp it up a little with Belle Meade, and then we get a little heavier alcohol with the Bullet, and then you get a greener whiskey. It is a unique bourbon. It's a really cool bourbon, and everything they make is unique, and I think that's one of the things. It's also, to be quite honest, if it's in your state, it's available and affordable. I think this bottle is about $45. You know, to be honest, I'm not standing in line for bourbon anymore. I've got enough in my cellar. So the idea of, I get that some people do, that's terrific. But if you want a great everyday drinking bourbon that's a high proof, this Pinhook is a terrific, terrific chance to get in on a bourbon early. So go buy some and sit on it. But they will be releasing it as more age comes to it. I think they bought about 1,300 barrels originally, and they're going to do 100 a year. So you'll be able to taste this from now until it hits about 12 years old. So I don't want to take too long. It's about 5:10. If anybody has any questions, you can either type them in or just comment in. I hope it was somewhat informative for you all. I also highly recommend drinking all the samples either tonight or over time. They will last a couple of days. So thanks so much for having me. I'm going to turn it over to Joe. But it's been a pleasure being here. Drink well and do good. Be well. Thank you.
So thanks, Chris. That was great. Yeah, very informative. You guys can't see it, but my wife's sitting here next to me on the left-hand side, and she's taking care of everything that's left over. But her favorite is definitely the Pinhook. We've had that before, so we're enjoying it. But thank you very much. That was a great sample. And everybody, appreciate you joining. Please reach out to us regarding any opportunities or anything you want to discuss further. We can do more demos. We can, again, weave a little bit about our MaaS offering. But we do appreciate everybody joining on in today. I know everyone's busy. So thank you. Have a good night. And Chris, thanks again for taking us through. And lastly, guys, we'll send out Q&A for everybody with answers as well. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.